Good morning and good afternoon. My name is Jason Casarella. I'm Executive Vice President of Business Development and Marketing for Advanced Clinical, a global clinical research services company featuring CRO, FSP, and strategic resourcing, which are all built to deliver a better clinical experience for our clients, our employees, and our partners. We're proud to continue our partnership with Pharma Voice today, and we congratulate Steve Mattis, who will be featured in today's panel, on being named to the Pharma Voice 100 and the prestigious roster of inspiring people in our industry. Today's panel is focused on collaboration, and as a senior leader in our company, Steve practices servant leadership every day and collaborates with his team, our clients, our other leaders, and our staff. He's a mentor, an innovator, and is totally committed to growth, both personally and professionally. And as a service company, collaboration and teamwork is really central to how we operate and how we deliver that better clinical experience. This year, Steve and his team have raised the bar on collaboration by building a really unique solution with one of our clients to address the current global pandemic. With this sense of collaboration, Steve has also incorporated experiences in managing teams, successes from other industries, as well as the intelligent application of technology partners to drive our company growth while not sacrificing the unique culture that is part of advanced clinical success. So we look forward to today's discussion, and I'll now turn the microphone over to Taren, who will moderate today's panel. Taren?
By the way, Jason is also a Pharma Voice 100 honoree. And thanks to our sponsor, Advanced Clinical. I'm going to have our panel facilitator, Dan Lundbeck, and go over the process for submitting questions and introduce our panel. Over to you, Dan.
Thanks, Taren. As Taren said, my name is Dan Lundbeck, and I'm the producer of the Pharma Voice Webcast Network, and I will be your facilitator for the next hour. It's called Collaboration Across the Industry, and it's sponsored by our friends at Advanced Clinical. Let's get on with the program. We're very excited to have such an esteemed group of panelists to discuss the importance of collaboration between stakeholders across the industry. So let's meet our panelists. We have Steve Mattis, a 2020 Pharma Voice 100, who has more than 20 years of strategic staffing experience across the information technology and life sciences industries. Before joining Advanced Clinical, Steve served as VP of Sales, Health and Life Sciences, IT Staffing and Solutions at DISYS, where he was responsible for the healthcare and life sciences technology practice and supported 15 of the largest global healthcare and life sciences clients. We also have Peter Anastasiou, a 2020 Pharma Voice 100, who, since joining Lundbeck in 2009, has held a variety of leadership positions and played a pivotal role in growing the business, as well as being a member of the company's executive management team. Before joining Lundbeck, Peter held a series of leadership roles within neuroscience-focused pharmaceutical organizations, including Neuronetics and Bristol Myers Squibb. And finally, we have Craig Serra, a 2020 and a 2017 Pharma Voice 100. Craig is focused on driving innovation for data operations. He has more than 18 years of experience in the pharmaceutical industry in the areas of clinical development, clinical technology, digital, innovation, strategy, and business management. That's a pretty impressive group. And for more information about our thought leaders today and any of our thought leaders throughout the marathon, please go to pharmavoice100.com. This session will be moderated by Taren Grom, editor of Pharma Voice. Taren, take it away.
Dan, thanks so much. This is an exciting panel for me, and it's a topic that is near and dear to my heart, collaboration. At Pharma Voice, we know that for the industry to move forward, it takes many oars rowing in the same direction by many different hands. One of the silver linings of the global pandemic has been an increase in collaboration across all stakeholders. But the big question is, what comes next? Can the momentum be maintained as operations begin to normalize? Our panel of experts are going to dig into why multi-stakeholder collaboration not only raises the bar, but can lead to greater productivity, increased efficiency, and better outcomes. Over the next 40 minutes or so, we're going to cover what has changed since the pandemic, where do we go from here, and how can companies or in the industry maintain momentum, and what are the keys to successful collaboration and what pitfalls should be avoided. And then we'll leave enough time to engage with you, the audience, in our Q&A. So let's get started. I think we can all agree that a lot has changed since the pandemic, but let's focus on the positives if we can. Craig, I'd like to kick off with you. In terms of multi-stakeholder collaboration, How has the pandemic impacted your relationships?
Thanks a lot, Taren, and thanks to the entire Pharma Voice team for making this happen. And for those tuning in wherever you are in the world, I hope you're doing well. So past 8 or 9 months, what has changed? I think first on a macro scale, despite what the news and social media and constant stream of information might have you believe, which by the way, our brains were never designed for. I'm seeing people being kinder, more generous, more caring, more compassionate, more understanding with each other. That's my view. It's on the whole. Obviously, there's counterexamples, but that's what I see. I see that in my personal life, and I see that at Novartis, who have been just incredible in terms of managing associates. Specifically, I think from an industry perspective, and within my world of Novartis, there's dozens of verticals coming together and doing unprecedented things from a purely DevOps point of view. Database go lives are in a couple of days, protocol approvals, in a few days. We've never seen that before. Now, I've said this before, it's not sustainable, but it's achievable. And so we have to find where maybe not even the balance, but we need to find really what is generally reasonable to be able to continue on with that. We all have employed strategies and tactics for faster trials, better data, lower costs. And we often look at that as a competitive advantage, but I actually see that changing. And we realize that I think the science is the competitive advantage. And that's particularly important when it comes to collaboration with service and tech providers, where operational competitive advantage is key to their business. But I'm seeing awesome partnerships and knowledge sharing across a slew of peers at Icon and Parexel and PPD, Signant, Medable, Castor, Protocol First, Medidata, so many others. So a big kind of virtual round of applause for those providers that are key to making this continue. And then lastly, on a personal note, some of you may know that I'm actually a patient in the Pfizer and BioNTech vaccine trial. So I've been going to Amici Clinical Research in Raritan, New Jersey. It's about an hour away. And they've been incredible. So being in the industry, it never really occurred to me to be a volunteer in a healthy volunteer trial. And so the collaboration that I've seen actually between David Roden, who runs the site, and Dr. Rob Falcone, who's the medical director, my primary care physician, just been phenomenal. And I've never would have experienced that 9 months ago. I wish I didn't have to, but I still would never have seen that. And so that's within this, bubble that we're in, that's very special to me.
Well, Craig, thanks so much for sharing that personal experience and letting us know that the clinical trial process is working, and, amidst all of the complexities that COVID is bringing forward. Peter, I'm going to turn to you next, and I'm going to ask you, one of your leadership mantras is bringing people together, both internally at Lundbeck and with your partners. So how has COVID impacted your organization's collaborative efforts?
Yeah, I think it's really accelerated it. And even though we've had the challenges of being remote, I think the thing that is an orienting principle for all of us has been meeting the needs of patients. So just as an example of that, we had a new product launch. We had a product approved for prevention of migraine in February. We had a product launch plan that was all going to be face-to-face, of course, with just some virtual. And all of a sudden, with the pandemic, we had to make a decision. One, do we go forward with the launch, or do we delay it? And if we do go forward, then we have to completely reorient the plan. And we decided, with patient at the center of what we do, that it was going to be difficult for us. Wasn't the way we had imagined it. But you know what? There's patients that are out there that are suffering, patients who've been waiting for therapy, patients who were in clinical trials, physicians who've been waiting. And so we did what was not so convenient for us, but the right thing to do for patients. And the collaboration that I saw among our team working cross-functionally, whether it be IT, whether it be marketing, sales, R&D, medical affairs, the market access team, all coming together, pivoting, because we had that orienting principle. And I don't think it's unique to us. I'm of course proud of that, But I've heard that and seen that within our whole industry. You could see it, as Craig talked about the vaccine effort, and thanks, Craig, for being a volunteer in that, because we certainly need people to volunteer for these vaccine trials. But the unprecedented collaboration I've seen in the industry between companies, as he said, the trial he's in is Pfizer BioNTech, but there's other big companies that are collaborating with each other. There's academic and private collaborations, like between AstraZeneca and Oxford. And then, of course, the government and private sector collaboration with the Warp Speed initiative on coming up with a vaccine and therapeutic treatments. I think I'm certainly proud of Lundbeck, but I'm proud of our whole industry that we've come together in unprecedented ways. And I think, when you have our mission of why we all got in this industry, certainly that's why I think the people in this panel got in this industry, but I think almost all of us did, was to help patients. If we have that at the center of what we do, obstacles like remote working or technology, they just don't get in the way. We just figure out how to make it happen. And I'm so proud of what I've seen.
Peter, I agree with you completely. I think that we are seeing those unprecedented levels of cooperation and really against competitive companies that are coming together in ways that they never would have before. So certainly, I think that's really very encouraging. And I'll turn to Steve in just a second, but I wanted to just go back, and I think that finding that reasonable balance, as you said, Craig, is really important, because can we all operate at this hyper speed forever? Probably not. So we really do need to find that balance. And I think orienting around the principles of the patient is straight on exactly right, Peter. So Steve, talk to me about how you are working through collaboration and effectively building and maintaining those collaborative teams, and by extent, partnerships during the pandemic.
I appreciate the question. So first, Peter and Craig, I couldn't agree more on a couple levels. One, it's been really neat to see the industry, because we get a viewpoint from a lot of different customers and how they're dealing with the pandemic and just the changing things. And then personally, I too feel like when you go to the store or you're just out and about, people are a lot more considerate and kind of concerned about everybody's well-being. It's been pretty neat to see. But yeah, so as a company, right, we have some different business lines, and so we've done some things differently in each one. In my group, so we've tried to be really creative as we try to get everybody connected. A lot of our team traditionally is together in office settings, and so we've been doing creative things like one of our employees was having a baby. Her first baby was due in a few weeks. So we threw her a surprise baby shower. So we had, 20 or 30 people waiting on a Zoom call, and she joined thinking she was doing her traditional bi-weekly one-on-one with her leader. And she got on, and here's all these people, and everybody was wearing pink because she's having a girl. And so we got all excited and had a great conversation. And then the best part was, about 5 minutes into this meeting, the doorbell rings, and we had a cupcake delivery. So they brought in cupcakes for her and her husband, and so it was really cool, and it was really neat to see the team really come together and try to make that a special event, because that's normally something we would do in the office, right? We'd have a shower, and so it was really cool to see everybody show up and get excited about that. And then in other parts of our business, like in our solutions business, like Peter and Craig were talking about, we had to do some things really quickly. Like, we deployed or rapidly changed our SOPs and how we do site visits, because obviously in a lot of cases we couldn't travel, especially outside of the country, to perform those site visits in person. So a lot of it went remote, and the feedback from clients has been great so far. And the trials have continued to go on, and we've continued to go back to work. Obviously there was a hiccup at first as we kind of figured all that out, but it's been amazing how the patient's viewpoint has changed, and then just how we've been able to continue on with the trials and deliver for the patients. So overall, it's been I think, like you said, Peter, we've just found ways.
I agree, and I think we talk about so much about the business collaborations, but it's also important to really connect with each other in terms of those personal connections. So that's a great story about how your team came together to really celebrate something that was really so important, especially when we need to raise sunshine sometimes in these times. So that's awesome. Dan, I think we have a poll question coming up. So if you wouldn't mind, let's launch our first poll and get our audience involved in the conversation.
Absolutely. So our first poll, we want to know, has your organization or department seen an uptick in collaborations since the pandemic? And we got a nice group of people in here, so we should be getting a lot of activity. They're coming in pretty fast and furiously. I don't want to give away too much, but we definitely have a lead horse in this race.
I'm not sure it's fair you get the inside scoop, Dan.
I think it's totally fair. All right, I think I'm going to call last call. Let's close this and share the results. I don't think anyone's shocked that they have seen an uptick in collaborations since the pandemic. It's just, you know, the nature of business right now. We got to all work together. Any other comments from the panelists on that?
I think it leads us naturally into our next bit of this conversation is, so that's great that we're seeing so much more collaboration and partnerships across the industry, but where do we go from here? And how can companies and industry maintain that momentum? Going back to what was said earlier by Craig, you know, is it sustainable? We are going at warp speed. A lot of companies are just moving so quickly now. Can they maintain this momentum? So Craig, I'm going to naturally turn to you. Can we keep going like this, or what needs to happen to make sure that we are having a reasonable balance?
I love this question. I thought a lot about it, probably too much. I think I need a hobby. But so first off, I think we should expect a slowdown. We can't sustain this speed, and it's not just at individual trial levels. It's not just at functional levels, but at enterprise levels, we can't sustain that speed. But knowing or having that expectation, I think, is key. But we should also expect to take a good look in the mirror, and why we decided that 12 weeks for a database go live was going to be our norm for the last 15 or 20 years, or why it takes 8 weeks to lock a database. Sorry, I'm very focused on the data piece. But the point is, we really need to take a look and say, why did that become the norm? And actively question that. Second, I found it funny that actually the physics equation for momentum is actually P equals mv, so mass times acceleration. And you can't spell pharma voice without P, M, and V. So it's things like this that actually, I think, help us keep going. But if we really dig in, we're talking about the mass of our industry and patients and stakeholders and kind of the world at large. And then we're needing to multiply that with a change in speed, whether up or down. And frankly, I think that the sheer mass of this all is going to actually help carry this forward. So I have a periodic table of the elements behind me, so I just delved into the science part of my mind, which is, I kind of had to dust off a little bit. But I think the last piece is, if you look at the word momentum, it's a collection of moments. So that's all we're stringing together, is a collection of moments. And I think if we realize that and we focus on just kind of creating more of those moments, that becomes days and weeks and months and years, and then we don't have to sustain it. It becomes its own sort of gravitational force, if you will, and becomes sort of baked into the new fabric of our industry. So I think those are a few of the thoughts that I have there.
Those are great thoughts. Thank you so much. Thanks for the shout out too. I think that it is really important that we look at the historical basis for why we do things the way we were doing them, and how they can be expedited as we go forward. And it doesn't have to be at light speed, but it can certainly be improved. So I think those are all excellent points. Thank you so much, Craig. I'm going to turn to you, Steve, now. So tell me what you're seeing and hearing. I know you deal with a vast array of customers. So what's happening out there, and what's happening within advanced clinical?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I was planning to answer this one way, but now that we were talking, it reminded me of a story. I have a good friend who works in the technology world, and his company had been running almost daily surveys of the employees to see how they're doing mentally and whatnot. and they really realized that people were burning out. And so they started actually shutting people's access down to their systems for like a week at a time. First, they said, hey, go take a week off. And of course, people would take the time off, but then they would be working and they would be able to see it in systems. And so they literally had to send people off for a week and shut their access down and get them away from things just because they were so bought into what's going on, and they wanted to make sure that the company and they were successful, but at their own expense, unfortunately. So anyway, that's one thing I've just seen outside of advanced clinical. I know for me personally, you know, I used to travel about 50, 60% of the time. And so I had a lot of variety. I got to be out, see people, talk to customers. Physically, it was a lot different than it is now, sitting in front of the screen most of the day. And so I've had to really focus on taking some time to make sure I go walk the dogs, or I go hit golf balls, or I find something to do that keeps me kind of sane, if you will. And I think we need to do that for our employees, right? I think it's very important that we create an environment of no guilt, right? They need to take an hour and schedule it and leave and go find something, you know, go to lunch with the person and their family or a friend or whatever, but really to take time away from their screen, because it is very easy. And like Craig said, you know, we're going fast and faster and faster and trying to do as much as we can. It's very easy for me to sit here from 7 to 7 in front of the screen. It really is. And so you have to kind of force yourself and let people guilt-free find time to get away.
Yes, guilt-free, yes, because it's always on right now in our new virtual reality. It's not when the boss walks by, but if you're on the screen. So I think that is something that companies are going to struggle with. And it's one of those challenges that we're going to have to come to grips with. Peter, what does your crystal ball portend for the future and going forward?
Well, first I have to say, Craig, that was shameless pandering to Taren with that physics equation. Although very clever, nicely done. Certainly I don't have any kind of crystal ball, but I think that, as Craig mentioned, I think there's some things that we're not going to put the toothpaste back in the tube on. If we figured out how to do certain things in 2 days that used to take 2 weeks, yes, I worry about burnout for sure. But what is it about our systems, processes, the way we do things, that when we had that urgent situation that we rallied around getting these things done, that we can't, why can't we keep that in perpetuity? And I think some of those things that are systemic and kind of process oriented, we have to learn from and keep in place in order to be as agile as I think we need to as an industry. But I do worry about the burnout, but you know, one of the ways we have to work through the burnout is really prioritize. We can't do everything as companies, as leaders. We can't push our teams to do everything. We have to focus on the most important things and get those right, and learn from the efficiencies that we've developed over the last several months. And I also think we need to continue, you know, a lot of people have talked about the way to work, and should we go to exclusively virtual and everybody works from home and that sort of thing. I think, to me, for the time being, we should maintain choice and flexibility and respect. You know, people don't have the ability, some people don't have the ability to come back to the office because of their own personal health situations, or they care for a loved one, or childcare. I mean, a lot of places, schools are closed. So I think we have to respect and give flexibility to that. But at the same time, there is value to being face-to-face with your colleagues, being back in the office. Actually, I'm here at the office now. Our office has been open since June. We've had about 1/3 of people who have come back. Nobody has, I hope, felt that they've been forced to. But, you know, for every person that says that they work better at home, there's somebody else that says, you know what, I need to be in the office so I can concentrate. I can't get stuff done at home. So I think having that choice, flexibility, and respect, certainly as we go through the pandemic, is going to be important to maintain the physical and mental health. But understanding that being together and socializing and being with peers is not only an effective way to get things done, but also is a healthy way to get things done for many folks.
Excellent. And I'll tell you, that ties into one of the questions that we've gotten from one of our audience members, Deirdre. She asked, Deirdre, by the way, who is a Farmer Voice 100 as well, she says that she agrees that sustainability of the speed is not really realistic, but the mind shift of collaboration should be sustainable. And she wants to know from you all, what are you doing to keep that spirit alive once the crisis of the pressure is relieved? So thoughts on that? I know you touched on a few of those just now, Peter, but let's elaborate a little bit more. Craig, what are you seeing?
I will unmute myself. That would help. So I'll pick one of the three. So within the company, what I'm seeing is an explosion of communication from associates or across associates and from our leaders who have been, and this is not pandering, they've just been absolutely incredible with being able to have town halls and kind of check-in meetings and things like that happened before, but I think they're happening with maybe a different look and feel to them now. And there's more, I think, transparency and openness in those meetings. You know, some people bringing in personal experiences, some people talking about work, but I think we're seeing a lot of that happen. And it's really easy to over communicate. It's really easy to get bombarded by different, you know, kind of flows of information. But I think at least within my world at Novartis, I'm seeing a ridiculous effort, an absolute A+ effort from C-suite down, up, down, and across to be able to just check in with people and really understand what's motivating people and what's on our minds and how we can make this better. And there's no grand sort of scheme. It's just sort of basic human checking in and making sure we're all right. And as I mentioned before, it's sort of just, we're stringing these moments along. And so even now we're almost, you know, essentially 9 months in, or a little over 9 months into a pandemic. And I don't know when the pressure is going to be relieved, but I know that we're doing the best we can with what we have. And I think it's just stringing a lot of that stuff along that's incredibly helpful.
Right. And Steve, I know you have you have your finger in a lot of pies there at Advanced Clinical, and there's a lot of groups that have to work together. So talk to us a little bit about your experience.
Yeah, I would totally echo what Craig said. Advanced Clinical's been, from Leo, our owner, down, it's been really amazing. The access and the amount of conversations that everybody are involved in that we weren't before. So it's been a good experience, and my assumption is it'll continue, which is great. You know, technology has made collaboration much easier. Like, we use Teams and we have all these tools. I think one of the maybe challenges we've seen, or one of the lessons we've learned, is that, for example, if you're on a project and it's going across several teams, it's really easy when you have a quick question and you're working on a project to just go in Teams and, you know, send somebody a note, hey, ask them a quick question. They give you the answer. And then all of a sudden a light bulb will go off and you go, wait a minute, I think there's like 8 other people involved in this that need that answer as well. And so things can kind of get stuck in a silo there, right? You can get that answer back and you can hold on to it, and then the rest of the team doesn't get it. So I think one thing we've had to do is really take a step back as we're planning a project or working on something that we're trying to achieve, and really make sure that our communication plan is really organized, more so than it was before, because we have these amazing tools that make communicating so much quicker and easier, but really to take a focus on making sure that everybody's getting the information. And so we've done some things in Teams with how we organize groups as they're working on something, so that those things are memorialized and things like that. But yeah, those are some of the things we've had to learn that we just maybe didn't do because we could go and have a meeting, or we could all be in a room together and whiteboard something, and now we're doing it all virtually, and it's a little bit more challenging. So the collaboration part's been a little bit more challenging.
Excellent. So those are great insights. You know, those, you know, when you're talking a lot of positives here, and not to drag us down, but I do want to get into a little bit more of the nitty gritty. You all have no doubt been part of some very highly successful collaborations, and maybe some didn't go as planned. Without giving up state secrets, let's dig into what works and what doesn't. Peter, kick us off. If we're going to see, increased collaboration, we have to have better ways of being better partners.
Excuse me. Yes, I think that's true internally and externally. And I think for partnerships of any type, formal, informal, there needs to be shared common objectives. So first, being very clear, what is it that we're both trying to get out of this? And if we can't align, or even internally, if a couple of different functions are working on something, they can't have independent visions of where the project is going. So there needs to be clarity about what's the destination before you can figure out how you're going to map out the route to get there. So I think that's critically important. I think listening is critically important. The old saying is, of course, that, we have 2 ears and one mouth because we're supposed to listen twice as much, but it's very easy to fall in the trap. And I'm certainly guilty of it, of, wanting to get into, my opinions and share my views, but hearing others out, hearing the other party out, I think is critically important. So I think those are some of the things that have to happen for those partnerships to be successful. Again, the formal and informal ones. I think, as both Steve and Craig talked about, frequent communication, especially now during all of this. I have too seen an uptick. I mean, we've tried to be purposeful about it, but I know that there's been improved communication all the way around, and I that shouldn't stop. And I think, I mentioned it early on, but I think back to the purpose part, we have to know at the end of anything that we do, there's a patient that's relying on us. And so I think if we have that as our North Star, that'll help us prioritize, that'll help us, permanently embed these kind of reduced processes and SOPs so that we can get things out in light speed without burning ourselves out just by cutting those corners permanently in terms of some of the bureaucracy, and knowing that our actions do have urgency because patients are waiting on us.
Absolutely. Patients are always waiting, and it's great to hear the work that you're doing there at Lundbeck. Craig, you have been involved in a lot of collaborations over the years. What are some of the lessons you've learned in terms of what makes for a good partnership?
So it's a great question. So collaboration is really tough. It's getting actually, I think, more difficult. You have to work really, really hard at it with especially how connected we are. The sheer amount of engagement that is generally expected to make a decision. You need to get buy-in from a lot of people and a lot of different groups in the company, outside the company, wherever. But on sort of a one-to-one level, it's very easy. And I think Peter said it so well, is that I think if you commit to some ideal and commit to where you want to go, you can kind of work within that construct or framework. And I like to boil down to kind of transparency, trust, and openness. And those things, I think when I've seen things go really, really well, those are the themes that come out. So whether it's trying to get funding for a project or trying to work with another provider or trying to get something else going that generally might have taken forever, if we just kind of commit to those few things, I think we can really, really speed things up. And I think just on a one-to-one level, people tend to appreciate that. But we're certainly always able to ask a person what motivates them or how they like to collaborate instead of just being a mind reader. But in terms of the didn't going well piece, I just want to comment that we just have to put politics aside. I'm not talking about governmental politics either. I'm talking about career progression, advancement, stepping on each other politics. And I'm sure everyone's guilty of it from time to time, but we have to be cognizant of that. And I think that's the one big thing that when I've seen things kind of go sideways or be way tougher than it really should be, that becomes kind of the underpinning theme. So I think if we can put that piece aside, I think that really opens up our ability to trust one another more, to be more open, and to be more transparent.
Again, I think that goes back to what Peter said a little bit earlier too. It's about orienting around the principle, around the patient. And so making sure that that business piece of it is there, but it's also personal. It's personal to patients and because they are waiting. Steve, I'm going to have you round out this end of this conversation and talk to me about your experiences in terms of what makes for a good partnership, what makes for a good collaboration, and what doesn't.
That's a good question. So I'm going to steal what Peter said. I hope you're okay with me using that. The true north, I think, is a really, it's a really powerful way to sum that up, right? And the patient at the end of the day is the true north, right? And as an advanced clinical, we talk about a better clinical experience. That's just something we talk about a lot. It's permeated through the culture. We bring in guest speakers, people who have been patients in trials and have had successful outcomes. They come and talk to the team pretty regularly. So we really try to stay focused on that being our true north, if you will. And then, like Craig was talking about, you know, politics and just wanting to, people having their own agendas, if you will, is real. I mean, that's just part of life and part of how everything works. But I do believe that if, you know, you one, have the true north, which is the patient, and two, with each individual project you're working on or program that we're working on, if we have a shared vision or a shared goal, it makes collaboration a lot easier. For us, we work with a ton of partners, right? Whether it's sites when we're delivering a trial, whether it's the client that we're delivering to, whether it's partners in other countries and whatnot. And I think at the end of the day, it really comes down to making sure that everybody understands what that goal is or what the vision is for that project and program, and making sure that everybody's on board with having a successful outcome there. And so for us, we spend a lot of time picking the right partners and to be honest, a lot of times picking the right customers. Not every customer is a great fit for us. And we recognize that, and we know that our customers do as well. So
it's excellent. I mean, I think we've covered a lot of themes here. We were talking about trust, transparency, not assuming what the other person is thinking, making sure that we have the proper communications in place, and making sure that we're staying in contact and understanding what the goals are, or that true north, as you both said, in terms of the end outcome and what is the goal of that collaboration and that partnership. I think all of those are incredibly important, but as you all stated, it's really the patient who sits at the center of this, and that's where the decisions should be made and how those collaborations should be formed and how those partnerships should be rendered. So before we head into our Q&A, I'm going to tap each of you to share with me your personal, how you're raising the bar. It was the question we asked for our July-August issue, and I'd love for you to share with our audience what it is that is driving you and how you all are raising the bar. Steve, we're going to start with you. How are you raising the bar?
You throw me on the skewer here quick.
You can handle it.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I would say, you know, really expecting a lot out of myself as it pertains to giving people the permission to be healthy, I guess. Really to be mentally and physically, and just letting them be healthy as they get through this, however that is, right? Because, you know, my reality is one thing here where I live and in my environment, but really trying to be open and listening and supportive to what other people's reality is. We have some people that are in large cities and their environment is totally different than what I'm dealing with, right? I had employees texting me video from San Francisco yesterday as it was dark with smoke, and you know, their reality couldn't be different. I live in a very rural setting, so just really trying to be supportive and help those folks through those experiences, because they're very different than what I'm dealing with, and making sure that they're mentally and physically healthy as they get through it.
Absolutely. What's happening in California is just terrible right now. I couldn't agree with you more. Peter, I'm going to tap you next. How are you raising the bar? How's Lundbeck raising the bar?
Yeah, well, I think I as a leader, and Lundbeck is trying to raise the bar by bringing people together. I think, you know, me as a leader, I think all of us as leaders, I'm not necessarily the one that's putting work products together on a day-to-day basis. I'm not the one that's calling on our customers. I'm not the one on the manufacturing line making our medicines. And by the way, a shout out to the supply chain people from not just Lundbeck, but every company. I mean, talk about something that we haven't given enough kudos to. The fact that we've maintained our supply of these important medicines as an industry, and the incredible work that's been done to create all these vaccines, assuming that they become, positive in clinical trials, I think is amazing. But I'm not the one on that manufacturing line. I'm not the one that's running the clinical trials. So I'm not the one that's calling on payers. So my job as a leader, and I think all of our job as a leader at the end of the day, is bringing people together for that common purpose to get things done, and understanding that I can't be successful without an enormous amount of work and great work from the people on our team. So I think that's how I'm trying to raise the bar, is first of all having that understanding and doing everything I can to facilitate those groups coming together.
Excellent. And thank you for that shout out to our unsung heroes out there who are making sure that medicines are being delivered to those people who need them desperately. So I couldn't agree with you more. Craig, tell us, how are you raising the bar?
Sure. So first, I think that the people that I work with are raising the bar a hell of a lot more than I'm raising the bar. I just happen to be on a panel. And that's, I think, the biggest shout out I can give to colleagues at Novartis is that they're just doing a tremendous job with executing on collaboration, and basically just sort of walking the walk and talking the talk. It's really awesome to see. I want to just really quickly go to Deirdre's question, as it ties into this. I think there's a ton of kind of patient advocacy work that's going on with essentially every company out there. But what I'm actually seeing a ton of is individual kind of one-to-one conversations about clinical trials, about bringing drugs to market. I don't know if anyone's noticed, but we're in the news. That has never really happened before. We see billions, if not trillions of dollars ebb and flow on enrollment curve and enrollment projections and actuals versus projections, essentially weekly now from very large companies. We see a patient in the AZ trial having an ADR, and we're following that. That is unbelievable. I actually don't believe it sometimes that the world that we're in is in the news and being talked about. So, Deirdre, to your question, I would say that actually we're doing things on a one-to-one level, knowledge sharing about how this stuff works. People that I talk to at Novartis, at other companies, they're talking about how they talk to their spouses and kids and friends, and whoever will listen about this stuff to try and educate and kind of just talk to about this, because it has been such a world that has been kind of behind a curtain for so long, and now it's right there. So if you're ever having kind of a day where you're not wondering if things matter with what we do, just remember we're in the news, and we've never done that before, never been there before.
Excellent. And Steve, you were nodding your head there for a minute, so jump in.
It's really funny that you say that, because I have a group of guys that I golf with regularly, and they now I'm the topic of, they're asking me all the questions, right? So what about this one, and what's going on with Pfizer and biotech, and what do you know? And so I'm become more popular, I guess, or at least what I do is more popular than it has ever been. So I totally agree. It's very interesting.
We're in the news in a good way right now, right?
Yeah, in
the other way. So
if I can chime in too, I think it's a great point that both Craig and Steve are raising. For a long time as an industry, we haven't had a great reputation, which I think is undeserved given the significant amount of research dollars we put at risk every year to create new medicines. Some of our medicines make it to market, most of them don't. But we still nonetheless get vilified, I think, unjustly. Now people are getting a real-time education through this vaccine and therapeutics development. I mean, to your point, you're hearing on the nightly news about things like phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 development. I mean, people, the public is getting a real-time education about our industry, and I think that's good for us. And of course, we've seen our industry's perception rise, and hopefully that continues because people hopefully are appreciating the great work that we do.
Absolutely. We're seeing report after report, to your point, Craig, that people didn't know what a clinical trial was 12 months ago. And so while so many people in the industry have been evangelizing about the importance of clinical trials, kind of went on deaf ears. But now people are participating in clinical trials in, I wouldn't say record numbers, but certainly much more significantly than they were a year ago. So that's all good news because we need more clinical trial participants to bring more and better medicines to market. So that's great. So, we kind of dived into our chat room for some questions. And so let's continue to go along that path. There's another question here from Amanda, who wants to know, while it's wonderful to see the collaboration and the support happening within individual companies and among companies, but what about collaborations with regulators? Have we seen, and how has that changed during the pandemic? Comments?
I can start. From my perspective, I give kudos to the FDA. That's the main regulatory group that I have exposure to. It may be true with other regulators around the world too, but their unprecedented responsiveness, and we're not even involved in vaccine or biotherapeutics development. We're a completely CNS focused company, so we don't work in these areas, but the speed at which they've worked on these is impressive. But also in our area, despite the significant effort at the FDA on focusing on vaccines and therapeutics, they've been incredibly responsive to the things that we've been working on with our clinical trials and adjustments we've needed to make to keep things moving to try to get therapies for these important diseases, these CNS diseases, to the market. So I think the collaboration again has increased. They're probably experiencing the same kind of burnout that we're experiencing as an industry. And so I don't know how sustainable that is. But again, hopefully they've learned by the same things that we talked about how you can loosen up some things, maybe cut down on timelines, maybe make some permanent changes to things to facilitate efficiencies and speed without sacrificing, of course, quality or safety. So big kudos to the FDA.
Again, it goes back to that point Craig made earlier about questioning some of those status quo milestones. That why does it take so long? Why is this what's the industry standard? Why do we have to do it this way? So I think that this whole idea of collaboration is bringing to light some of those questions and starting to question the status quo. And do we have to really go do it this way, or can we find a different way to do it? And that leads me to another question in here, unless you all want to jump in about the FDA, and I will step back a second.
No, I would just agree with what Peter said. I think it's allowing us to use, I came from the technology world, and it's allowing us to use things like automation and in virtual tools a lot more in trials that we couldn't before. So I think it's been fantastic.
Yeah, and maybe I'll use this opportunity to say, so with the, agree completely with Peter and Steve, with the specific coronavirus guidances, I think most of the major regulators have put those out. And the way I read them is they further reiterate in so many cases what has already been sort of given permission to the industry to do for at least a few years, maybe going back 4 or 5 years. So to me, it just reiterates that they're saying, go ahead, you can make some of these changes. We're cool with that. And then in terms of specific interactions with them, agree completely with Deidre. We're just seeing tremendous collaboration and communication with 3 or 4 different regulators specifically. And I think we do have to realize that they are made up of people just like us, human beings just like us, and so they're subject to the same kind of burnout that everyone else is. And so we have to be cognizant of that. But I've seen kind of an uptick in that compassion, I think, for each other.
Excellent. Another one of the questions here is that the pandemic has sparked more cross-pollination and therefore more co-creation. So there are some unique opportunities here for the industry to take advantage of. What are you seeing in terms of co-creation within your organizations? Have you been witnessing any of this? Maybe it's a project, a product, a process, you know, in different ways, because you're bringing together different people from different parts of the organization in new ways through technology.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to start off if Steve and Peter don't mind. I guess I'm kind of bucketing this in the same bucket as collaboration. I'm seeing more and more of it, and there are specific projects that are kind of being spun up. There's more, and I think quicker decision making on things. And we've certainly had to prioritize where funding goes or what we might do, because we're now in this kind of different bubble right now. But I think those decisions are happening quicker, and they're happening with a certain extra amount of care and diligence, but again, quickly. And I'm just seeing across as I mentioned earlier, the service and tech providers that we work with and that are our peers. I think we're seeing a lot of kind of opportunities being spun up and sort of carried out further than just, you know, a couple introductory conversations. I think we're seeing more and more of that between providers, and that's again, that's really, really key because those providers are so embedded in the way that we run our trials across the industry. You know, we can't make it without companies like Advanced Clinical.
Steve, I saw you nodding your head when he was talking about the technology piece of it. So you have that tech background. So talk to us a little bit about how this co-creation and if there is stuff happening in your world there.
Yeah, I would agree. We've had technology partners that have been very quick to react and bring new tools to us and help us almost collaborate with them on things that they could change or what things we can do differently with the tools that we're using. And then just partnerships outside of technology, some of our other partners, whether it be sites and whatnot, the quickness that people are making decisions, like you said, or how quickly they're responding to changes. We're actually working on a couple related trials to the pandemic. And so whether it's the FDA or other groups or other partners, the responsiveness has been incredible. So it's been exciting to see.
Excellent. Peter, last thought before we move on?
I would just add that, you know, the old saying is necessity is the mother of invention. And out of necessity, I think everybody has gotten creative. I think people have come together. I don't want to repeat a lot of these things. And I think we're doing things differently, whether it be you know, investigator meetings, doing ad boards, speaker programs for customers, you know, clinical presentations to payers. We're doing our first exclusively virtual sales meeting that we would always do face-to-face next week. So we've had to get creative, and we've had to, you know, to use the words of Leanna, who's talking here, we had to cross-pollinate and co-create and come up with new ways of doing things. And like I said before, some of these things, the toothpaste is not going back in the tube. Some of these things are working well.
Right.
And maybe we should rethink how we do these things permanently.
And that goes back to our beginning of the conversation. So out of this, you know, COVID tragedy, and it has been tragic on so many levels, there are some pieces of silver linings. And I think that these are the pieces that are going to push the industry forward. And it's through the efforts of all of you who are on this panel. That's how it's going to happen. Thank you to our panel. Steve, Peter, and Craig, you've been incredible. And I want to let the audience know that you can follow our thought leaders on Twitter to continue the conversation using the hashtag PharmaVoice100. And their handles are on our speaker tab at the pharmavoice100.com website. So thank you all so very much. We can't do this marathon without you all and your insights and your thought leadership and your generous time and resources. So we are truly appreciative. So thank you so much.
Thanks to you, Taren. Thanks for putting this together.
Oh, it's our pleasure. This is what we do. We love this.
For more Pharma Voice 100 content, visit www.pharmavoice100.com.